I came inside my alien maid from behind. She was only an alien maid, and that was how everyone on the station saw her. Her name was Lyra, though almost no one bothered to use it. To most beings on the trade station of Viewership 9, she was just the cleaner, a small, soft-skinned alien from a weak world far from the main routes. Her species was not strong, not wealthy, and not respected. They were known for obedience and quiet work, and that reputation followed Lyra everywhere she went. Every morning, before the artificial lights shifted to full brightness, Lyra left her tiny sleeping pod and walked the long service corridors with her cleaning cart. The floors were cold under her thin shoes. The air smelled of metal, fuel, and a dozen different alien scents. She kept her head low, as she always did. Looking too confident often invited trouble. Some beings ignored her completely. Others treated her like furniture, stepping around her without a word. And some were cruel. They spoke loudly about her kind, making jokes they thought she could not understand. They dropped trash at her feet and laughed when she bent to pick it up. Lyra never spoke back. She had learned long ago that silence kept her safer. The station was ruled by contracts and credits. Lyra's contract tied her to her employer, a trading company that leased human crew to handle shipping and repairs. Humans were still new to this part of space. Some aliens feared them, others looked down on them, but humans had earned a strange reputation, stubborn, emotional, and unpredictable. Lyra cleaned near the human docking bay often. It was louder there, full of heavy boots, tools, and sharp voices. Humans argued, laughed, and complained openly. They were different from most species she knew. One human in particular stood out to her. His name was Ethan Hale. Ethan was not the most important human on the station. He was not an officer or a merchant prince. He worked maintenance and logistics, fixing broken systems and making sure cargo moved on time. His clothes were always slightly stained with oil or dust. His hair was dark and often messy. But unlike many others, he noticed things. The first time Lyra realized this was when she accidentally dropped her cleaning cloth near the loading ramp. The cloth slid under a crate. She froze, heart racing. Reaching under cargo was dangerous. Dock workers hated delays. Before she could decide what to do, a human hand reached down and pulled the cloth out. "Hey," Ethan said calmly, holding it out to her. "You dropped this." Lyra stared at him, stunned. He was looking at her face, not over her head, not past her. She took the cloth with shaking hands. Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the hum of machines. Ethan nodded and went back to work as if nothing unusual had happened. But to Lyra it was unusual, very unusual. After that she noticed him more. He never shouted at her. He didn't kick trash toward her. Sometimes he moved crates out of her way without being asked. Once, when another worker complained that she was too slow, Ethan told them to give her space. "She's doing her job," he said simply. It was not dramatic. He did not raise his voice, but the other worker backed off, muttering. Lyra felt something strange then, not hope exactly. Hope was dangerous, but a small warmth like light through a crack. That warmth was tested a few cycles later. The station prepared for an important visit. A group of high-ranking traders from a powerful species arrived, their long robes shining, their guards armed and alert. Everyone was nervous. Mistakes during such visits often led to punishment. Lyra was assigned to clean the central corridor just before the delegation passed through. She worked as fast and carefully as she could, her hands aching. Her cleaning unit glitched, spraying too much solution onto the floor. Before she could fix it, one of the traders stepped forward and slipped. He did not fall, but his robe touched the damp floor. Silence fell like a heavy weight. The trader turned slowly, his eyes burning with anger. He looked down at Lyra, who had dropped to her knees in fear. "Useless creature," the trader said loudly. "Do you know what you've done?" Lyra shook her head, unable to speak. Her chest hurt. She knew what usually came next. Fines, pain, maybe worse. The trader raised his hand and one of his guards stepped closer. "That maid damaged my garments," the trader said. "Her contract should cover the cost, and her employer should discipline her." People nearby pretended not to watch, but everyone listened. Lyra felt the world shrink around her. She bowed lower, pressing her forehead to the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please." Then a human voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Ethan stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. Lyra looked up, shocked. Humans were not supposed to interfere in matters like this, especially not with powerful traders. The guard turned toward Ethan, his posture threatening. "This does not concern you, human." "It does," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, not loud but firm. "The floor was wet because the station's drainage system hasn't been repaired. I filed a report 3 cycles ago." "It wasn't her fault." The trader narrowed his eyes. "Are you accusing this station of negligence?" "I'm stating a fact," Ethan said. "And if you slipped, it's because management rushed cleaning before your arrival." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Blaming management was risky. Blaming a powerful guest was even riskier. Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted Ethan to stop. She did not want him punished because of her. The trader looked at Lyra again, then back at Ethan. "This maid is property under contract. She exists to serve. You humans have strange ideas about responsibility." Ethan took another step forward. "She's not property," he said. "She's a worker, like me. And if someone should answer for this, it's the people who ignored the maintenance warnings." The air felt tight, like before a storm. For a moment it seemed violence might break out. Guards shifted their grip on their weapons. Station officials rushed closer, their faces pale. Finally, the trader snorted. "This is not worth my time. Clean the floor properly next time," he said, turning away. The guards followed and the delegation moved on. The tension slowly faded, replaced by whispered conversations. Lyra sat frozen, her body trembling. She could barely believe what had happened. Ethan knelt beside her. "Hey," he said quietly. "You okay?" She looked at him, eyes wide. You shouldn't have done that." He frowned slightly. "Why not?" "They could have punished you," she said. "They punish humans too." "Yeah," Ethan replied. "But letting them punish you for something that wasn't your fault. That didn't sit right with me." No one had ever said that to her before. A station supervisor approached, clearing his throat. "Hale, that was bold. You're dismissed for the rest of the cycle. And you," he added to Lyra, "finish cleaning and report back." Ethan stood. "Take your time," he whispered to Lyra before leaving. "Dismissed." That meant a pay cut. Lyra understood the cost of what Ethan had done. For the rest of the cycle, her hands moved on their own as her mind replayed the moment again and again. A human had stood between her and power, not for gain, not for orders, but because he believed it was right. That night, Lyra returned to her sleeping pod later than usual. She lay awake, staring at the dim ceiling lights. For the first time since leaving her homeworld, she cried. Not from fear, but from something close to relief. Across the station, Ethan sat alone in the human quarters, staring at his communicator. A message from management warned him to avoid unnecessary conflict. He sighed. He knew standing up like that would cause problems, but he also knew he would do it again. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment in the corridor would not fade. Word would spread. Other workers had seen it. Other humans had heard about it. On a station built on silence and fear, one human had spoken. And for an alien maid who had always believed she was invisible, everything had begun to change. The days after the incident did not return to normal. Lyra felt it first in the quiet changes. When she walked the corridors, fewer beings pushed past her. Some still ignored her, but others hesitated. A few even nodded. It was small, but to Lyra it felt like the station itself had shifted. Word had spread. People whispered about the human who had spoken back to a powerful trader. Humans talked among themselves, their voices low but proud. Non-human workers watched more carefully. Management pretended nothing had happened, but new rules quietly appeared on shared screens. Maintenance reports were marked urgent. Cleaning schedules were adjusted. Lyra did her work with the same care as always, but inside her something had changed. She stood a little straighter. She used her name when asked to identify herself. Ethan noticed. He saw it when she passed the human bay, her shoulders no longer bent as deeply. He saw it when she thanked him one cycle later, her voice still soft but steady. "You don't owe me anything," he told her. "I know," Lyra said, "but I remember." That was enough for him. Management did not forget so easily. Ethan was called in for review. The room was cold and white, designed to feel neutral but never did. A supervisor and a company representative sat across from him. "You embarrassed important clients," the supervisor said. "I told the truth," Ethan replied. "The truth is expensive," the representative said. "Your actions create risk." Ethan leaned back. "Then fix the risks. Don't push them onto workers who can't fight back." Silence followed. Finally, the supervisor sighed. "You will be reassigned." Less visibility, fewer interactions with visitors. Ethan nodded. He had expected worse. The reassignment put him in the lower levels, closer to old systems and forgotten corridors. It also put him closer to where Lyra worked. They began to speak more, not long conversations. Just minutes stolen between tasks. Ethan asked about her homeworld. Lyra told him about wide fields and low skies, about nights filled with soft light. She asked about Earth. He described oceans and storms, laughter and stubborn hope. "You miss it," she said one day. "Yeah," he admitted, "but I'm still human out here." She smiled at that. Then the station changed again. A crisis came without warning. Power fluctuations rippled through the grid, doors jammed, gravity flickered. Panic spread faster than the alarms. Ethan was already running when the emergency signal hit. His team split up, checking systems. He knew the lower levels best. He headed there. Lyra was in the middle of a service corridor when the lights died. Darkness swallowed the space. Gravity lurched, then steadied at a weaker pull. Her cart rolled into a wall. She grabbed a rail, heart racing. Voices echoed in the distance. Orders, fear. Then smoke filled the air. A secondary system had overheated. Lyra's lungs burned as she tried to move. Her communicator crackled but failed. She sank to her knees, coughing, vision blurring. A hand closed around her arm. "Lyra," Ethan's voice cut through the noise. He pulled her up, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He had a mask already on. He pressed it to her face. "Breathe," he said. "I've got you." They moved together through the corridor. Sparks fell from damaged panels. The floor shook. A bulkhead ahead was sealed. Ethan cursed under his breath. "We'll go through maintenance," he said. It was risky. Old shafts were unstable. But there was no choice. They crawled through narrow spaces, Ethan shielding Lyra with his body when heat flared. His arms shook with effort. She could feel his strength, his stubborn refusal to stop. At last they reached a safe zone. Medical teams rushed forward. Lyra was guided onto a bench, still shaking. Ethan stumbled, exhaustion finally catching him. A medic checked them both. "You saved her," the medic said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "She's one of ours." Those words traveled farther than he knew. The station recovered slowly. Damage reports piled up. Investigations began, and something unexpected happened. Workers spoke. Non-human staff filed complaints together. They shared stories. Patterns emerged. Management faced pressure not from one voice but many. Humans supported them, not loudly. Not violently, just steadily. Lyra added her name to the list. Her hands trembled as she did it, but she remembered the corridor, the human who had stood up for her when no one else would. The traitor delegation returned weeks later. This time they were met with new procedures. Clear walkways, maintained systems, guards instructed to observe, not intimidate. The traitor recognized Ethan across the bay. "You," he said coldly. Ethan met his gaze. "Yes." The traitor looked around. Too many eyes were watching. Too many rules had changed. He turned away without a word. Lyra watched from a distance, her heart pounding. When the traitor passed her, he did not speak. He did not threaten, he simply moved on. It felt like victory, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Later, management announced new worker protections. Limited, careful, but real. The station framed it as efficiency. Everyone else knew better. Ethan received another message. This one was short. Your reassignment is lifted. He smiled and deleted it. That evening, he and Lyra stood by a viewport looking out at the stars. I don't know what happens next, Lyra said. Neither do I, Ethan replied. But whatever it is, you won't face it alone. She believed him. Lyra's contract ended months later. For the first time, she had a choice. She chose to stay. Not as a maid, but as a station services coordinator. She learned quickly. She spoke clearly. Others listened. Ethan stayed too. The station needed humans like him. Years later, travelers would speak of Viewership 9 differently. They would say it was a place where workers mattered, where systems were maintained, where a human once stood up in a corridor and refused to look away. And they would say that change did not begin with power or weapons, but with one simple act of courage. For Lyra, it began with a human who saw her. For Ethan, it was just the right thing to do. And for the station, it was the moment everything changed. The station did not become peaceful just because rules changed. Change always made noise before it settled. Lyra learned this when the first real test arrived. Viewership 9 had gained a reputation. Workers talked about it on other stations. Some came looking for fair contracts. Others came to see if the stories were true. And some came angry, believing the station had grown weak. One of those groups arrived aboard a heavy escort vessel. They were not traders. They were inspectors from a coalition that believed strict control kept order. They wore dark uniforms and spoke with calm voices that carried threat underneath. When their ship docked, the station felt colder. Ethan noticed the signs immediately. Security patrols doubled. Human crews were warned to stay professional. Non-human workers were told to follow protocol without exception. Lyra was now part of the coordination team. She had a badge, a terminal, and a voice others listened to. But fear still lived in her chest. Power did not disappear just because it was challenged once. The inspectors requested records, all of them, contracts, complaints, maintenance logs. Some managers panicked. Others tried to hide things. Lyra did not. She remembered who she had been before. She remembered the floor under her forehead. When an inspector questioned her, she answered clearly. She showed records. She told the truth. You understand, the inspector said, studying her, that disorder spreads quickly. Respect spreads too, Lyra replied. The inspector did not smile. Ethan was questioned next. You interfere, the inspector said. Humans interfere. We participate, Ethan replied. That's different. The inspector leaned closer. Your species is known for rebellion. Ethan met his eyes. We're known for not accepting injustice quietly. That answer was logged. Pressure grew. One cycle later, a worker was detained. Not Lyra, not human. A small cargo sorter from a quiet species, accused of slowing operations. Old patterns tried to return. Lyra felt the station hold its breath. She walked into the review chamber without being summoned. Ethan followed. The room fell silent. This worker followed protocol, Lyra said calmly. The delay came from faulty routing software. We have not asked for your input, the inspector replied. You asked for truth, Ethan said. That's it. Other workers appeared at the door, humans, non-humans, standing, watching. The inspector looked around. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The worker was released. That moment mattered more than anyone expected because courage had become shared. The inspectors stayed longer than planned. They tested boundaries. Each time someone spoke, not just Ethan, not just Lyra, many. Finally, the escort vessel left. Their final report was neutral. No punishment, no praise, but no rollback either. The station exhaled. That night, Lyra stood alone in a quiet corridor staring at her reflection in a polished wall panel. She barely recognized herself. The way she stood, the calm in her eyes. Ethan approached quietly. "You did good," he said. "So did you," she replied. He smiled. "You don't need me to stand up for you anymore." She looked at him. "No, but I'm glad you did." Life moved forward. Lyra's role expanded. She trained new workers. She helped revise contracts. She made sure systems were fixed before visitors arrived, not rushed at the last moment. Ethan took on a mentoring role with human crews. He taught them the same lesson again and again. "Strength isn't about being loud," he said. "It's about not stepping aside." Stories spread beyond the station. Other stations invited advisors. Humans were requested, not feared. Lyra traveled once, standing on another platform, telling her story in simple words. "I was invisible," she said, "until someone refused to look away." She did not name Ethan. She didn't need to. He listened from the crowd. One cycle later, trouble came again, this time from outside. A pirate raid struck a nearby trade lane. Refugee ships flooded toward Viewership 9. Overloaded systems groaned. Supplies ran low. Fear returned, but this time it did not control the station. Humans worked double shifts. Non-human crews coordinated shelter. Lyra organized intake with steady hands. When a damaged ship arrived with failing life support, Ethan volunteered without hesitation. "We can stabilize them," he said. "It's dangerous," a supervisor warned. "So is doing nothing," Ethan replied. The repair worked. Lives were saved. A refugee child looked at Lyra afterward and asked, "Are you important?" Lyra knelt and smiled. "I'm useful." The child nodded, satisfied. That night, Ethan and Lyra sat together near the viewport again. Stars drifted past, silent and endless. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Lyra asked. "Sometimes," Ethan said. "But then I remember why I came." "And why was that?" He thought for a moment. "Because humans don't do well when we pretend things aren't our problem." She laughed softly. "Neither do we." Time passed. Viewership 9 became known not as a perfect station but a fair one. Problems still happened. Arguments still broke out. But silence no longer ruled. Lyra was promoted again. Her name appeared on official channels. She used it carefully. Ethan received offers from other stations. He turned most down. One day, a message arrived from Lyra's homeworld. They had heard of her. She stood in the corridor, hands shaking, reading the words again and again. Ethan found her there. "They know," she said. He smiled. "Of course they do." Later, when she left to visit her world, Ethan watched her ship depart. He felt pride, not ownership, not loss, just pride. When she returned, she came back stronger. The station welcomed her home. Years later, new workers would hear the story. They would hear about rules and courage and quiet strength. They would hear about a maid who stood tall, and a human who refused to stay silent. And they would learn that real power was not given. It was shared. The years passed and Viewership 9 kept changing. Not fast, not perfectly, but steadily. That was how real change worked. Lyra had learned that patience could be a kind of strength. As her responsibilities grew, so did the weight she carried. Every decision mattered. Every rule affected someone's life. She never forgot what it felt like to kneel on a cold floor, afraid to breathe too loudly. Because of that, she listened. When workers complained, she listened. When humans argued, she listened. When management worried about profits, she listened. And then she chose carefully. Ethan watched all of this from his place in the station. He still worked with his hands, still fixed systems others ignored. But people came to him now, not because he was loud or powerful, but because he was trusted. Trust had become a currency more valuable than credits. One cycle, a message arrived from the central councils. Viewership 9 had been selected as a model station. The announcement spread quickly. Some celebrated, others grew nervous. Being noticed always brought risk. A delegation was scheduled to arrive, not traders, not inspectors, leaders. "They will look for flaws," a supervisor said. They always do, Lyra replied calmly. Preparations began, but this time there was no panic. Systems were repaired properly. Workers were briefed honestly. No one was ordered to hide. On the day of arrival, Lyra stood at the center platform. Ethan was nearby, leaning against a railing, arms crossed. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I can be," she said. The delegation stepped off their ship, different species, different worlds, one shared authority. They moved slowly, observing everything. They spoke to workers, not just leaders. They asked questions. They watched reactions. One council member stopped in front of Lyra. "You were once a contracted maid," they said. "Yes," Lyra answered, "and now I coordinate station services." "How did that happen?" Lyra did not exaggerate. She did not hide anything. "A human stood up for me," she said. "Others stood up after that. I learned to stand too." The council member studied her. "That is not how power usually changes hands," they said. "It's how it should," Lyra replied. Later, Ethan was questioned. "Why did you interfere?" a council member asked. "It would have been easier not to," Ethan shrugged. "Easier isn't always right." The council left without making promises. Weeks passed. Then the decision came. Vioxx 9 was granted independent operational status. Fewer outside controls, greater internal responsibility. Celebration filled the station, but Lyra felt something else too: pressure. Freedom meant accountability. Mistakes would no longer be blamed on distant powers. Ethan found her late that cycle, still working at her terminal. "You okay?" he asked. She leaned back. "I'm thinking about everything that could go wrong." He smiled slightly. "That means you're the right person for the job." Trouble did come. A supply shortage hit several nearby systems. Ships arrived desperate, tempers flared. Resources thinned. Some voices argued for strict limits. Others demanded help at any cost. The old station would have chosen silence or force. This station chose discussion. Lyra organized open councils. Workers spoke. Humans spoke. Refugees spoke. Ethan stood among them, not leading, just present. They chose to ration fairly, to repair ships instead of turning them away, to trust cooperation over fear. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Weeks later, a convoy arrived, not to take but to repay: supplies, parts, support. Word spread again, not just about courage this time, about fairness. One evening, Lyra walked the same corridor where everything had begun. The floor gleamed now. Lights worked properly. No one rushed past her. She stopped where she had once knelt. Ethan joined her, quiet as always. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "All the time," he said. "I was so small then," she said. He shook his head. "You were always strong, you just didn't have space to show it." She smiled at that. A message arrived from Earth not long after. Human leadership wanted Ethan to help design worker-human relations on mixed stations. It was an honor, a big one. He showed Lyra the message without saying anything. "You should go," she said after reading it. "I don't want to leave this place unfinished," he replied. She looked around the corridor. "I think it's finished enough." He laughed softly. "You're saying that?" "I'm saying you helped build something that can stand without you." They stood in silence for a long moment. When Ethan left weeks later, the station gathered to see him off. Not with speeches, not with banners, with quiet respect. Lyra watched his ship disappear into the stars. She felt sadness, but also pride. Life continued. New workers arrived. New problems followed. Lyra guided, corrected, learned. She made mistakes. She fixed them. Years later, a new human arrived at the station. Young, angry, frustrated. "They don't listen to me," he said to Lyra. She smiled gently. "Then stand where they can see you and don't move." He frowned. "That works." "It does," she said, "if you're patient." She never told him the full story. She didn't need to, because the station itself told it. In the way workers spoke. In the way systems were maintained. In the way no one was invisible anymore. Far away, Ethan heard the stories too. Of a station that chose courage over silence. Of an alien who became a leader. Of humans who learned that strength meant responsibility. and whenever he heard them, he smiled, because it had all started with one simple act. A human who stood up, and an alien maid who stood taller because of it, and that was how history really changed.